Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the MGTOW zone. This is basically a video that I'm doing kind of in a response to a subscriber of mine, another video, YouTube video content uploader by the tag name Raging Golden Eagle. And he asked me a long time ago to make some videos on basically Islam and feminism, or its relation to feminism and MGTOW and all that kind of thing. And I wanted to do that, and I had been planning to do that, and I actually did a few videos. I did maybe 5 short videos in a series called Polygamy versus MGTOW, which is related to this topic about marriage and Islam and man-woman relationships in Islam and how it all works, or at least how it works from my perspective and my experience. And I'll provide a link below where you can go and look at those videos I'm talking about. And in a sense, what I'm going to do, or at least start to do now, is kind of continue that series. And I've had a hard time thinking up of a title for this series. I was thinking maybe MGTOW versus Islam, or Islam and gynocentrism, or Islam and marriage, or Islam and men-woman relations. But in a sense, I want to cover all. I want to try to cover all of that in a series. And God willing, I will at least pull 3 or 4 videos out of my ass for this series, hopefully. But I think I'm going to stick with the name MGTOW versus Islam, because I think that will cover everything within that title. So, without further ado, sit down, relax, and enjoy the first installment of this series titled MGTOW versus Islam. You are traveling through another dimension, a dimension of confusion, banality, and shattered expectations. A journey awarded to you by a small red pill. Your next stop, the MGTOW zone. The first video of this series, MGTOW versus Islam, is going to be called The Value of Men and Women in regards to Islam. Now, you can make a comparison and contrast between what I'm going to say and your own culture or ideology or religion or wherever you come from, and you will see that the concepts of gynocentrism and hypergamy exist regardless of your nomenclature or the ideology you subscribe to, whether that be a religion or a philosophy. It is everywhere. So let's begin and let's learn a little, shall we, together, about the value of men and women according to Islam. In Muslim tradition, even in the non-Arabic countries with large Muslim populations, a woman covering her body to some degree beyond Western norms is very common. Most of Western media is dominated by television images or internet images of Middle Eastern women wearing the full burqa, or the burqa, the long black bloody cloth that Saudi Arabian women apparently by law have to wear. And I know you know it. Nothing but their eyes and ankles may be visible. Some burqas cover even the eyes. We've all seen the images. Now, I have never personally been to Saudi Arabia, but I do have a few friends who have worked in and around the area and have shared their experiences with me. In Saudi Arabia, although Sharia law is commonly practiced, the degree to which it is enforced depends on the area you live in, just like every other place in the world. The closer you are to the center of the kingdom in Riyadh, the stricter the rules for dress, etc. However, as you branch out, it is not uncommon to see women without the full coverings and both sexes enjoying a less so-called modest lifestyle, which is obviously contrary to what the media tries to sell you. In fact, the largest density of debauchery, prostitution, drug and alcohol use is centered around the holiest city for all of Muslims, being Mecca. And why do you think that is? Well, it's simply because that's where most of the tourists go. Basically, Mecca is the Las Vegas of Saudi Arabia, but they won't let the rest of you know about it. And I'm tired of Western people thinking that their own debauchery is any different than the debauchery of these so-called Muslims in their own country. But that is a video for someone else to do. But besides that, however, I do currently live in Indonesia, which is the most populous Muslim country in the world. And though burqas are extremely rare, there is still another very common covering called the jilbab in Indonesian, or the hijab in Arabic. I'll flash some images of these head coverings as I speak. Now, these are a more modest covering that is only concerned with the head and the hair and sometimes the breasts. And these more relaxed etiquettes of dress also apply in almost every other majority Muslim country in the world. As a matter of fact, before the early 90s, you would be hard-pressed to find a jilbab or hijab anywhere in Indonesia. And it seems daily that I also witness more and more use of the full burqa by women here. Now, I have a theory that this directly coincides with the fall of Suharto in 1998, but that is the topic, again, of another video. But what the Western world doesn't see on their television sets is that these coverings, these hijabs, these jilbabs, these burqas, what they represent is a power for women. Yes, a power, which put her in a position of garnering attention while at the same time keeping her assets from being exposed. What these Eastern women know is that a woman's modesty generates far more value for herself in terms of marriage and reproduction than her immodesty generates in regards to simple male attention. It's easy to catch the eye of the masculine of the species by showing a little skin. It's harder to command his full attention through subtle coercion and visibly displaying a defense that covers your assets. And though subtle means take far more effort, it rewards the woman with much more benefit in the end, with a covert form of control of the male sex. Now, with this simple example of women's dress in Muslim cultures, I believe it opens a larger window to world culture and male-female relations around the globe. I believe that what we are witnessing is the divergence of the thread of gynocentrism that has run its course through all history and culture since the dawn of man. In Saudi Arabia and other Muslim countries, we have seen what happens when gynocentrism is allowed to flourish unchecked. For fear of the garden being overrun with weeds and insects, the gardener falls victim to lack of sleep in his vigilance, pulling up any strange root that may take place, or squashing any bug that may wander too near. In order to preserve the beauty of his priceless relics, the caretaker locks all his wares behind secure doors, that they may never be touched by another's hands or seen by wandering eyes. In places like Saudi Arabia, man's obsession with woman's vulnerabilities, her virtues, and ultimate protection puts the man himself in a prison made not of iron bars, but by the female character. In Saudi Arabia, 60% of all university graduates are Saudi women. But women, at least as far as I know until now, still cannot drive, vote, and as stated before, in many places must wear a full burqa when in public. Now, this is all due to gynocentrism run amok. In the minds of the men, it is done in her honor and for her protection. Nowadays, even in the West, radical feminists are demanding that men stop staring at them, aka stare rape. Is this not another version of completely covering women's eyes so as that no man may look into them or even show interest in her form? Further, in many parts of Saudi Arabia, men and women may not mingle. And in my opinion, this is a hardship on both sexes. But in the end, it's still done for the sake of the woman's protection, with no concern of the man. Again, in my opinion, this is a result of gynocentrism that is out of control, where men poured more and more virtue onto women until they were too sacred to even look at. Yes, in these cultures, women's power comes in much more subtle forms. These forms of over-the-top gynocentrism, they also exist in other countries such as Indonesia, but they are not as pronounced. I mean, consider royalty in Western nations, especially Europe. Normal people are expected to be on their best behavior when around a king or a queen or a prince or a princess. These people of royal blood and extreme wealth are worshipped by the masses, even to the point where the lower class may not mingle with or spontaneously approach such royalty. And everybody accepts this. Are these royal people oppressed? No, they certainly are not. So we must question, how oppressed are women when they are forced by law, well, which is very rare indeed, except for a small tiny section of Saudi Arabia, or encouraged through culture to cover up? Again, this is not oppression as modern feminism would have it. It is gynocentrism run amok and the ultimate perversion of female worship. She is so valuable, your lowly man eyes may not casually gaze upon her form. Unless, of course, you have won over her heart, usually with money and the ability to provide, almost beyond your means. In contrast, let us consider the West. In the West, gynocentrism has diverged in the opposite direction. In the West, I believe that the modern state of man-woman relations and the existence of modern feminism is a direct result of the opposite extreme. I have always said that feminism is the direct result of gynocentrism with idle hands. And what do I mean by this? Well, another way I often put it is like this. Feminism began with the invention of the washing machine, but it always ends when the washer breaks down. Rather than seek to constantly uplift the virtues of women, as has happened in Muslim countries, men in the West have always sought to, in a way, invite a woman to men's level in order to share the same wonders that he does as he navigates through life. We, the Western male, chose not to uplift a woman and her virtues, but rather coddle her in another way by making her life easier. It wasn't enough for us to fight wars for them. It wasn't enough for us to do the hard labor and provide so that she may birth and raise a child in relative safety. No. Now, we had to make what few responsibilities women did have obsolete. So, we invented the washing machine. We invented the dryer, the dishwasher, the radio, the TV, the automobile, the sewing machine, the vacuum cleaner. We invented industry. And what exactly was the result? Well, women, who since the times of hunting and gathering had a prominent role in society, began to realize that their time and energy was far less valuable. She became bored while the men wrote laws and built infrastructure. her gynocentrism began to lose its worth. Her hands became idle. And with that idle time, women began to meet. In their confusion, they began to conspire, because by their nature, they showed little interest in the workings of men. They began to instead interfere in his affairs. This gave rise to the upper-class women's movement of the suffragettes and the invasion of male spaces such as clubs and pubs, with the eventual outcome of the prohibition of liquor. Women, after thousands of years of gynocentric control, felt lost without that control. In cultures where the quality of woman was overvalued and gynocentrism ran amok, women were worshipped and protected to the point where they were hidden from male sight, far too sacred for the casual observer. In cultures where gynocentrism lost its worth completely through industry, women began to covertly and in recent times aggressively try and relinquish the control that they were so accustomed to. Western women today constantly cry foul about the conditions of women in Muslim countries such as Saudi Arabia, especially in the way they must dress. But honestly, these women have it pretty damn good in regards to what real responsibilities they have to bear. Here in Indonesia, women couldn't care less about feminism. They are content with taking on a more passive role when it comes to the real responsibilities of the modern era, and are more than happy to cover themselves a little bit more in order to feign virtue and spark interest in the passing man. If we simply consider the Muslim concept of women covering her assets, in many Muslim countries, when a woman opens her jilbab or her hijab or burqa, her head covering or body covering, she is exposing her vulnerabilities to the man she has chosen to expose them to. She, even if forced by law, has the power to show her assets of beauty and reproductive quality to whom she chooses and when she chooses it. Further, any woman in that position will only expose her vulnerabilities to the man she and her family deems worthy, aka her husband-to-be. Now I ask, what Western male would not want to marry a woman who has not been touched by another man, let alone seen by another man? I know many Western men might scoff and proclaim such things as, well, she has no experience, or she doesn't know of the real world. But let me ask you this: how many experienced and real liberated women from the West does it take to make a happy family or relationship? Well, apparently less than 50% if you consider the divorce rates in the West. Western men have little choice but to pick up the scraps among women who have been sexually revolutionizing themselves through the school of hard cocks. What I'm really trying to convey here is not only a concept of man-woman relations that are very foreign to Western men, but also I'm trying to highlight the extremes to which gynocentrism can go if men in the real world refuse to acknowledge it. But in saying so, let us not disregard men and their vulnerabilities. Understanding this concept may be far more important to men than even understanding that gynocentrism exists. The world is changing quickly, and I don't think anyone knows what it's changing into. Not the majority of us back-breaking workers or that small minority of who write history. All I know is that things must change. They have to change. And I think one concept that really needs new wiring is the concept that men have no vulnerabilities. This is absolutely false, but the idea is practiced and actualized by so many societies today. Everyone has vulnerabilities, but when they manifest according to sex or gender, they take on a very different form depending on whether or not you have a penis. As the world changes, we begin to see more clearly that men have a vulnerability as well. However, theirs is more subtle and not represented so visually and physically as a woman's is. A man's vulnerability, his asset, is his back, upon which he shoulders all the responsibilities of protector and provider. However, in modern times, a man's worth is not necessarily measured by the strength of his back, but by the thickness of his wallet. The monetary value of what he carries in his back pocket represents the modern equivalent of this so-called provider protector. Yes, men have vulnerabilities too. And what is often forgotten is that the man's jilbab or hijab or his burqa is his wallet. When a man opens his wallet for you, he is exposing his vulnerabilities, which today is represented by printed bills in the currency of your choice. Men do not hide behind veils. They are exposed all the time to everyone. A man's value is his ability to work, produce, protect, and engineer. Never has there ever been a law allowing or even forcing a man to keep his assets or his vulnerabilities protected. Every day a man must walk around naked, exposed by the value of the clothes he wears or the car he drives, the wristwatch he sports or the job he slaves at, the home he has earned or the social class he comes from. The punchline of all of this is that whether or not you live as a Western man in the wake of the gynocentric oppressed West, the birthplace of modern feminism, or you live in the out-of-control gynocentrism that is the unadulterated worship of women in these so-called Muslim countries, a man is still expected to pay for dinner. And remember this, the parts of Saudi Arabia where the so-called most oppressive rules exist, especially regarding what clothing women can wear, is also home to the richest and most powerful men on the planet. Now, just close your eyes and meditate on that for a minute or two. When you open your eyes again, you'll find yourself in the MGTOW zone. Wait. Before I go, let me leave you with something. There is this new phenomenon here in Indonesia where we have these women feigning piousness. In other words, they wear their jilbab or hijab, the head covering, but at the same time they wear very tight-fitting clothing so that their asses and their boobs are very prominent. And here there's a new term for it. We call it jilboobs. So as the music lets us go into the MGTOW night, feast your eyes on some images of the jilboobs. Enjoy, everybody. Good night.